In this business of mine, you have to know when an opportunity arises. You mean no disrespect, and I too wish you well, but I am afraid I must make you an offer you can't refuse.
Sir, this is Deal or No Deal.
It's been 50 years since Franis Ford Coppola's crime epic The Godfather hit theatres, and since then, it's become part of the film canon like nothing else. I could go on about how good it is, but for God's sake, when even the Rugrats parody you in content quite literally aimed at the opposite target demographic, you know you've made it in the public consciousness. So what's there really left to say about the movie? Quite literally nothing. So instead of talking about that, today I'm going to, in celebration of the film's golden anniversary, that's 50 years, look at the EA video game from 2006, based on the very first Godfather film. It only took me 15 years to play the 35th anniversary celebration. Right, so before I get into this, obviously this video will feature spoilers for The Godfather. If that's an issue, well, you've had, half a century to watch it, so, I don't know, make an evening out of it. It's only a masterpiece. So the game starts off about a decade before the film's plot does, with a massive explosion taking place at a local business ran by an associate of the Corleone family. It's here that the game shows off the hand-to-hand combat that you'll be using a lot, and honestly, it's a bit weird, but it works. You lock onto an opponent using the shoulder buttons, but instead of the face buttons for a swing, you use the right analog stick. It sounds weird, yes, but it actually works super well. After this scene, the man we've just gotten to play as is gunned down in cold blood, and his son runs out and bumps into Don Vito Corleone, who promises him revenge. Flash forward nearly a decade, and it's a character creator screen. Why? We've already seen what the kid looks like. This was released in 2006. You know, the prime era for these custom creator character menus you used to see in a lot of old video games. I'll be blunt, this feels pointless. So it's 9 years later. Come on, you know the drill. It's the day of my daughter's wedding, I need a favour, blah blah blah, come on. The mother pops up and asks the Don to take in that boy from several years ago, who by the way is named Aldo Trapani, and give him a role in the family after he's fallen in with a rough crowd. After a more in-depth look at combat with Luca Brasi, voiced here by Gary Chalk of Transformers fame, the game's presentation reveals itself to be an open world affair. The closest thing I would compare it to would be GTA 3, but with like a 1950s Greater New York area skin. And from here, plot-wise, it basically picks up where the film does. I would go into more detail, but I think most everyone knows the beats of the movie, so it makes more sense to focus on what it does differently. Of which there is plenty. Think of it as a mirror universe Godfather, with a few extra characters thrown in, a few key events happening in different order, and Michael not being played by Al Pacino, but by, this guy. Al Pacino elected not to lend his likeness to the project, instead opting to work on the Scarface video game. That was a choice.
Not a good one.
Thanks, RIPARIA. Jokes aside, Michael was played here by, according to the fan wiki, Joseph May. And hey, he's from Southampton, like me. Hey! So he too knows the joy of the Southampton grease rain, complaining about the Itchen Bridge, and making fun of Portsmouth's league standings. No wonder he buggered off to Canada. Contract disputes aside, the rest of the cast not only lent their likenesses, but for the surviving members, they also lent their voices. Robert Duvall returns as Tom Hagen, James Caan as Sonny, Abe Vigoda as Tessio, and very briefly, Marlon Brando returns as Don Corleone. Now, I say briefly because most of Brando's lines were totally unusable. To understand why, it's key to know that at the time of recording, Marlon Brando was very much on death's door, suffering from type 2 diabetes and a whole host of other medical conditions related to that. His medical equipment, laboured breathing, constant pausing, all added up and made the vast majority of his recordings unusable. All but one of Don Corleone's lines are by the very talented Doug Abrahams, and credit where it's due, it is an excellent performance. The one line from Marlon Brando that made it in, however, is perfect. It's the scene where Michael visits his father in the hospital to find the place totally abandoned. Aldo shows up to help, along with Fran, the game's love interest, meeting her brother Monk, who effectively takes the place of mentor for Aldo after Luca Brasi goes to the bottom of the Hudson. During the build-up to the assault, if you quietly walk over to the Don's room, you'll hear him and Michael have a short, quiet conversation.
Just lie here, Pop. I'll take care of you now. I'm with you now. I'm with you.
You know, there's a lot of foolishness about this Sollozzo business. It's so unfortunate. It's really unnecessary. I gave him my no with all my courtesy. I told him his business would not interfere with mine. And he didn't take it right. I know that the Italian family is bringing misfortune out on our heads. Well, that's life. You know, everybody's got their own tale of sorrow.
And that's it. That's the one line of Marlon Brando's that made it into the game. It's a bittersweet Easter egg, given the scene that it's lent to isn't anywhere near as good as the film version, with the intense stare down between Michael, Enzo the baker, and a rival family completely replaced. That's a recurring theme, and honestly it's a welcome one. A few scenes were rewritten to better suit the flow of a video game, usually adding more action. Great example, Paulie's execution turns into a full-fledged boss fight. This works a treat for those scenes. That said, for some of the other scenes, I don't know, it kinda loses the luster. On the topic of what does and doesn't work, the gunplay is a bit of a mixed bag. Without any upgrades to your character, it's a bit messy, and to be honest, with headshots being a 100% kill, there's not much reason to use anything other than pistols or magnums. Also, the two gunplay control schemes are a tad awkward. One is a free aiming sort of thing, but with not great aim sensitivity, and the other one is an automatic lock-on thing that will default to the enemy's chest. The move is to hide, use the lock-on, and then shift the aim slightly up to the head, or if things get too close, go for the strangles in hand-to-hand. Seriously, in the first 2/3 of the game, I must have killed people by strangling more than anything else. It's just too OP. And the best part is that instead of the other baddies in a group shooting at you, they just stand there and let you do it. Like, they'll just start trying to punch you or just look at you. Oh, harder, daddy! There's one other detail I feel needs to be covered, and this might be an unpopular opinion. I don't see why this game was open world. Seriously, this open world is, for the most part, barren. All you really have open to you are various businesses that you can extort for money, but all you ever really spend that money on is clothing, since ammo is everywhere. You could buy an extra safe house, but the game gives you one in near about every district. Honestly, at times it feels like the point of the map is just to drive around in between missions. The side content is one of two things: extortion, like I just said, which gives you a weekly income, or hit contracts, and to be honest, you could lose the former and have the second be triggerable from side missions in a hub level. Yeah, a hub level. There's a perfect candidate in the Corleone compound just right there, waiting for you. Like, most missions in the game start here, so why not just make it a gangster version of Peach's Castle? There's also a few weird quality of life issues. namely that navigation is rather hard. There's no GPS type system to help point you in the right direction, so getting around involves constantly pausing and checking the map just to be sure that you're actually going where you need to be going. It's beyond cumbersome, especially in escort missions, where you really just want to focus on avoiding obstacles and enemies, but instead find yourself trying to navigate NYC. And like I said earlier, it's a very, very bland map with few and far between landmarks of any note. Grey and brown slabs, putrid air, bad infrastructure, traffic routes that make no sense. You know what, in hindsight, this might actually be the most realistic depiction of New York City. Before wrapping this up, I should talk deeper into the original side of the plot that blends nicely with the film's own, namely Aldo's love interest Frankie and her brother Monk, who get the bulk of their stuff out of the way while Michael is off in Sicily. Frankie basically takes the role of Apollonia, even getting her own tragic death that sends Monk down a very Frito-like path to the FBI. See, the way it works is that Aldo basically takes the place of various background characters, and then an alternative series of events unfold that more or less give you the same result as the film, such as right at the start, going to beat up the guys who assaulted the funeral director's daughter. For the most part, it does a very good job, but then there's some really weird stuff, like going full Scarface with Sonny on a Barzini warehouse that should trigger a full-scale mob war. Instead, it just sets up Sonny's death scene, instead of Carlo selling him out. Speaking of Carlo, he, Kay Adams, and Connie are notably missing, which, given the major roles they play in the film, feels very odd. Like, really, really odd. The new stuff works, but it does feel weird whacking Tessio at the halfway point instead of right at the end. Sticking the horse's head in the bed after the mob war starts doesn't really make much sense in terms of the family's power, and shoehorning in a revenge plot near the end for Aldo's family with Barzini is a little, But overall, as a complete package, the game is fine. Yeah, fine. That's the word here. It's not that good, but it's certainly not bad. It's just fine. There's even a hidden secret ending where you can become the Don of New York after the Corleones leave for Nevada. It's worth noting that this was released on nearly every major platform at the time. I went for PS2 just because that was the best-selling version, and that was not a mistake at all. That was a pretty solid choice on my end. No complaints at all. Visually, it's great, as you'd expect for a late-in-life PS2 game. It looked great on an HD TV through my back-compatible PS3. Gameplay-wise too, it's pretty solid, and hey, as a bonus, this is like, what, $10 for a copy? It's a bargain, and honestly, you could spend 10 to 13 hours on something significantly worse than this, like Shadow the Hedgehog. Don't think I've forgotten. One day soon, the day will come where I have to repay you that favor. Oh Christ.